In this video, I'm going to talk to you about getting physical in wildlife photography. What do I mean by getting physical in wildlife photography? I'm not talking about getting out there and getting into it with someone when you're photographing wildlife. What I'm talking about is the importance of getting outside of your comfort zone so that you can make the most of your opportunities when you're photographing wildlife. All too often I see people who are taking the most physically comfortable position. They're often standing, they're possibly shooting from a tripod or a monopod, and that is often not the best place to shoot from. Often the best place is down lower, where you can get a more even perspective with the animals so that you're not shooting from above, and really bring the viewer of the image into their world. And when you do that too, the subject will appear bigger in the image. Now I understand, of course, that sometimes it's not always possible to do this for many reasons. Sometimes it's not safe to get down lower with the animals. Sometimes it might make the animal feel uncomfortable. We also all have our own physical limitations, and sometimes it's not possible to do this, but I see many cases where there are people who are able-bodied and entirely capable of taking up a different position. And often also I see some people who always adopt the same position all the time, and you really want to be trying to change things up as much as possible. And that means not only changing the position of where you're shooting from in terms of height, but also in terms of even the perspective and the angle at which you're shooting. So for example, if you can get down low and shoot up, that's a very different perspective. Now you might not even have to lie down in order to do that. There might be a situation where the animal is up higher than you, and where you are, if you maybe move to a different location and get down lower, you might actually be able to shoot up. You might be able to shoot up and maybe use a different lens, and perhaps say use a wider lens and get a different kind of perspective for the shot. Often getting out of your comfort zone and forcing yourself to do something that's different can really produce some interesting images, and it doesn't work all the time, but sometimes you can be pleasantly surprised. I have a shot of a bearded seal that I took. I went out there and guess what? I had put the wrong lens on the camera, or it was not the lens that I expected it to be. And in fact, I pulled the camera out of the bag, and it was my shorter lens, and I thought it was an 85mm lens. Well, it was actually a 24mm lens, and it's a dramatically different field of view. And I had to move to a completely different position to get the most out of using that lens, and it really forced me to work hard. And actually, when I was doing that and I was shooting from a boat, I was hanging off the side of the boat, and it was, I remember it was quite physically exhausting doing this, but I was happy with the result. I want to give you a analogy with landscape photography. Often I see people, they come to a place where there is a possible landscape shot, and they deploy their tripod and they stick the camera on, and they do their stuff and they take their shot without sometimes even exploring the possibilities for what might be a better perspective, a better framing. And when you are trying different options and changing the angle at which you're shooting from, changing the position at which you're shooting from, you're composing the elements in the image, and that just opens up all kinds of possibilities. So you might get to a position, for example, where there is, where say you're at the edge of the water and you're at a lake or a river, and there's a mountain and some other scenery in front of you, and it might seem obvious to just take the shot from where you are, but perhaps there's a fantastic shot that's just out there a little bit in the water, and perhaps a little bit down. One of the most effective techniques for exploring and finding some of these options is to take your cell phone and use it as a tool to check out what might be possible. And in fact, it's much easier because when you want to, say, check out a perspective that's really down low or, say, out there in the water, you can just sort of step out there very quickly and, use your cell phone, see what it looks like, and actually just take a shot and then bring it up to your face and inspect it in more detail. And once you've found something that works, then you deploy your tripod and attempt to put the camera in the position where you had the cell phone when you were exploring the possibilities. Now, in a similar way, with wildlife photography, there are these positions that sometimes are not so obvious. Now, we're not necessarily going to do what I described with the landscape scenario, because often the animals are moving around and things are not so static, and we need to be able to respond more readily. But it's just an example of where sometimes the perspective is not where the right perspective or the better perspective is not where you expect it to be. The other thing is, if you are with other photographers and you see them all shooting from a certain position, often what you want to do is do the thing that no one else is doing. If you want to get unique shots that no one else is getting, you want to shoot from a different angle, from a different place where they are not shooting from. There are some places that you go where they have vehicles for you to go out and see certain animals, and they'll have gimbals that are mounted on sides of vehicles, on the sides of cars, or the sides of boats, and they tout this as a good thing, but it's not always a good thing, because it really locks you into a position, and often that position is too high. It's not the position that you really want. It's much better often to just handhold your camera and have the ability to explore different possibilities. So now, this whole subject of getting physical is all about not taking the easy route and making the extra effort where you can. And I actually feel great when I come out of a session and I'm somewhat physically tired, because I've really put a lot of effort into finding the best position. Sometimes I've been contorting myself, I've been shooting upside down, and maybe angled down some slope, and I had to maybe scrunch my knees up in some position in order to find the right place to shoot from. And you never know what might happen, and because wildlife is often moving around, and you have to respond to them, and you don't want to limit yourself. You want to really have as many options as possible. So I really encourage you, if you don't already do this, don't just take the most obvious position or the one that is the most physically comfortable. Really get into it. It's actually fun sometimes to make that extra physical effort. Sometimes it even means that you're going to get a bit dirty. You might be lying down in some mud or getting a little bit wet, but you may get some fantastic images out of it. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please post below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.